Hey there, my name is James Lee. Welcome to 5149, my weekly video blog where I talk about business, politics, and society. Today I want to talk about AOC, I want to talk about FDR, and I want to talk about change. But before I get going, I want to say a big thank you to all the wonderful people out there who've taken the time to like, share, and comment on my videos. I really appreciate it, and if you're watching this and not yet subscribed, please consider supporting my work by clicking on the subscribe button and the notification bell icon. All right, so in 2018, AOC came into Congress as an insurgent political outsider with some pretty bold ideas and promises for transforming America.
What the Bronx and Queens needs is Medicare for all, tuition-free public college, a federal jobs guarantee, and criminal justice reform. We can do it now. It doesn't take 100 years to do this. It takes political courage.
That was an ad titled The Courage to Change, and it's a pretty good ad. Pretty good. But when you come out swinging like that with lots of public awareness and a huge social media following, two things kind of happen. Number one, you assume this kind of cult-like status with a fanatic fan base. But two, at the same time, people's expectations of you are also going to be sky high. And now that she's in her second term, we're seeing a shift from her being this firebrand who led a sit-in at Nancy Pelosi's office on her first day in Congress to someone who's more tempered and open to working within the system. This has caused a bit of a rift among supporters of the progressive wing of the Democratic Party to the point where a lot of people are calling her an outright sellout and a fraud. And look, I'm not here to get into all the Twitter drama. I mean, I have no idea what's going on behind the scenes, but what I do care about is what the future might look like. And I think one of the best ways to do that is to look at the past and revisit the story of how FDR, known today for his many pro-worker, New Deal, and massive infrastructure programs, actually worked behind the scenes to co-opt insurgent third-party movements to preserve capitalism in America. The year is 1932. Unemployment is at 24.9%. There is a sustained drought in the central region of the United States, particularly in Oklahoma and Texas. Businesses and families are defaulting on loans in record numbers, and more than 5,000 banks have failed. And as individualistic and anti-status as America is, meaning that we oppose intervention by the state into personal, social, and economic affairs, the epic collapse of our economy during the Great Depression due to unregulated hypercapitalism is as good a reason as any for a transition to social democracy, defined generally as economic and social interventions to promote social justice within a capitalist-oriented mixed economy. And there were strong class-conscious movements throughout the early part of the 20th century. Eugene V. Debs, a prominent early 20th century socialist activist and founding member of the Industrial Workers of the World, ran as a socialist candidate for president of the United States 5 times between 1900 and 1920, with his strongest performance in 1912 earning about 6% of the popular vote. In 1924, prominent Wisconsin politician Robert La Follette, consolidating support from the Socialist Party, farmers groups, and labor unions, mounted a serious third-party run for president, finishing with over 16% of the popular vote and 13 electoral college votes, with the goal of breaking the combined power of the private monopoly system over the political and economic life of the American people, calling for government ownership of railroads and electric utilities, cheap credit for farmers, the outlawing of child labor, strong laws to help labor unions, and protections for civil liberties. Powerful leftist third-party movements emerged at the state level as well. In California, Upton Sinclair's End Poverty in California movement won a majority of the 1934 Democratic gubernatorial primaries, and by 1938, former EPIC leaders had captured the California governorship and a U.S. Senate seat. In North Dakota, the revived Radical Nonpartisan League won the governorship, a U.S. Senate seat, and both congressional seats in 1932, and continued to win other elections throughout the decade. In Minnesota, the Farmer Labor Party captured the governorship and 5 House seats. Wisconsin, too, witnessed an electorally powerful progressive party led by the La Follette family, who were backed by the Socialists. Now, despite all the success I've just talked about, and with all the devastation that came with the Great Depression, why was it that no strong radical movement committed itself to a third party during these years? Well, a key explanation was that President Roosevelt was really successful in including left-wing protests in his New Deal coalition, and he did so in 2 ways. First, FDR co-opted the rhetoric and demands of opposition groups. In the 1936 election, when 2 prominent third-party leaders sought to mount a challenge to President Roosevelt's re-election, Huey Long of Louisiana and Robert La Follette of Wisconsin, that threatened to throw several states over to the Republicans, Roosevelt shifted his rhetoric and, to some extent, policy to steal the thunder of his populist critics. He talked about ideas like equalizing the distribution of wealth, He advocated for tax reform proposals to raise income and dividend taxes, to enact a sharply graduated inheritance tax, and to use tax policy to discriminate against large corporations, along with becoming overtly supportive of trade unions. Raymond Moley, an organizer of Roosevelt's Brain Trust, emphasized that the president, through these and other policies and statements, sought to identify himself with the objectives of the unemployed, minorities, and farmers. Second, FDR recruited opposition leaders into his entourage. He gave those who held state and local public offices access to federal patronage, particularly in Minnesota, Wisconsin, and New York, where strong statewide third parties existed. These non-Democrats included Minnesota Governor Floyd Olson of the Farmer Labor Party, New York City Mayor Fiorello LaGuardia of the American Labor Party, and Wisconsin Governor Philip La Follette and his brother Senator Robert La Follette Jr., both members of the Progressive Party. This strategy had a profound impact on the strength of third-party movements. In 1937, Philip La Follette's executive secretary told Daniel Hoan, the socialist mayor of Milwaukee, that a national third party would never be launched while Roosevelt was in the saddle because Roosevelt had put so many outstanding liberals on his payroll that any third-party movement would lack sufficient leadership. In the 1938 midterm elections, both the Wisconsin Progressive Party and the Minnesota Farmer Labor Party suffered crushing defeats, losing most of their congressional seats, and Republicans badly defeated both Philip La Follette in Wisconsin and Elmer Benson in Minnesota in their gubernatorial re-election campaigns. And although he was unhappy about the Republicans gaining 81 seats in the House, 8 seats in the Senate, and 13 governorships, the president noted that some good things had occurred, saying, quote, "We have on the positive side eliminated Phil La Follette and the farmer labor people in the Northwest as a standing third-party threat." Wow, okay, so pivoting from our short little history lesson to today, I see a lot of parallels between what's happening then and what's happening now. Joe Biden's establishment administration seem much more willing to appease the progressive Democrats, and progressive firebrands like AOC and the Squad are now also much more open to working with the establishment as opposed to fighting them. And yeah, a lot of good things can come out of these types of arrangements. The New Deal enacted banking and stock market regulations to avoid abuses and provided greater financial security through the introduction of Social Security and the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, and overall created a better balance among labor, agriculture, and industry. But at the same time, given the catastrophic circumstances brought about by the Great Depression and capitalism as a whole, it's hard not to imagine a different path the country could have taken, such as nationalizing banks, railroads, and other major industries. You know, I'm not here to argue who's right or wrong. I don't know if AOC has some sort of grand plan. I more so made this video to point out that policy changes that challenge the current power structure, like Medicare for All would for the current healthcare and insurance industry, is highly unlikely to happen without sustained external pressure from outside the system. So when someone like AOC is publicly espousing ideas like Medicare for All, but saying that they're going to do it by working within the system, it's hard to imagine that coming to fruition. And also keep in mind the establishment isn't ideological. Their focus is more on self-preservation. I recently saw that AOC was helping fundraise for moderate Democrats, but do you think if the roles were reversed, if AOC was in trouble, they would turn around and do the same thing for her? Not a chance. Keeping it real, if the establishment could continue to squash the insurgent wing of the party, they would. But if they can't, they'll work with them until they don't need to anymore, like what happened to the progressives and socialists when they suffered electoral losses in the late 1930s. So I guess my point is this. History has a tendency to repeat itself, and I think in this case, regardless of how you feel about her personality, the outcome or outlook for an AOC or another Squad type figure, to me, is entirely predictable. I mean, if Joe Biden could once advocate for getting money out of politics, and if Nancy Pelosi could once support Medicare for All, it's entirely within the realm of possibility or even probability that AOC and the like could end up a run-of-the-mill, milquetoast politician. So there you have it, a little history lesson from FDR to AOC that gives us a glimpse of what the future might look like for the potential success of a human-centered policy like Medicare for All. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this week's video. Shout out to Z2YouTube for giving me the idea to talk about this topic. Yeah, if you have something in mind that you'd like me to explore more, let me know. Please take a second to like this video and share it with others and subscribe to my channel so I can keep making more videos for y'all. My name is James Lee, and as always, thank you for your time, and I will see you next week.